won't have any of it.
Well, I don't have any internet access either right now on the light. I had it for almost like a day and a half. I was like, maybe better. Guess not.
Refuses to connect.
Yeah. Well, it's because you have no internet.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what won't connect.
Yeah. I have
All
that same.
right. How we doing, everyone?
Hi, Chef.
Doing fine. How about you?
Living the dream. Living the dream. Happy early Easter.
Thank you.
So, today's class is going to run a little bit backwards. And the reason it is because the timing it's going to take to make everything. So we're going to, I'm going to show you how to make the apples first because I already made the dough. And then I'll build the tart and bake it. And then we'll make the dough together. If that makes sense. I already made one batch of the dough so I could show you the full assembly because otherwise we'll be on here for 2 hours because we got to wait for the dough to chill. So we're going to start with the apples and then I'll show you how to actually assemble the tart. And then once I throw it in the oven, we'll make the dough. And by the time we're done making the dough, my tart will be ready and you guys can see the final product.
Good.
Sounds like a plan.
Now, if you see how high tech I got rid of those big bulky headphones and I have some Bluetooth ones now. So I can come all the way to the oven and we can keep flowing. This is fantastic.
Much better.
I'm so smart. Okay. Why don't you guys let me know when you're set up? Now, the apple tart tatin is a great dessert. It can be done with apples, pears, a lot of different fruits. But, you know, mostly you want to use these harder fruits like an apple or pear. They work really well for what we're doing. But not all apples are the same. So if you wanted to pick an apple that was going to be, and yeah, you can peel your apples while we're talking is probably a good idea. An apple that's going to hold up nicely. Typically, the go-to one for apple pie is Granny Smith because it's a little firmer. But yellow apples work really well too because they have a little more sweetness. So they're not as tart. I'm a big fan of both. But you want to peel your apples and we're going to start making our caramel mix for the apples to actually cook them in. So let's get all those apples peeled first. And don't worry about if the apples oxidize or turn brown because we're going to bake them and they're going to get dark anyways. Okay. There's some work in the background happening. I hope you guys don't mind. They're just prepping the final orders for Easter. Chef Natalie and her team are making tiramisu and coconut cakes and lemon meringue pies and cookies and all sorts of fun stuff. Nothing obviously will be as good as the apple tart tatin, but you know, it is what it is. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, very fine.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure before we get more into this that my volume level is set up good on my side. So this is one of those pastries that's like super cool to make, and you know the basic principles you pick up in here are awesome. So like, you know, and it got me thinking of other dishes. So next week on Thursday we're gonna do a jerk pork tenderloin, and we're gonna make a homemade applesauce for it. But for this, doing this kind of pie dough, this is a little different than a normal pie dough. This tart dough has egg yolk in it, and the egg yolk is going to keep it from being so flaky and give it a little bit of a toothsome feel. It's actually a trick I stole from a recipe by Ann Burrell on the Food Network. But again, we steal something and then we change one ingredient, and all of a sudden it's ours. Or in your guys' case, don't steal any ingredients and just call it yours anyways. I won't mind. Peeling fruit is my least favorite thing in the world to do. So
6
we're gonna-
apples? Chef?
6 apples, correct. And you may not use all of them, depending on how thick you cut them. And there's gonna be quite a few variables in here that we're gonna go through while we're doing it. Thickness of how you cut the apples is one of them. How much moisture you put in the dough is one of them. Whether you're rocking a convection oven or conventional oven. So your butter is divided into 2 pieces. Each one of those is the equivalent of 1 stick of butter. A stick of butter is a 1/4 pound or 4 ounces. So we went ahead, because we buy in 1 pound blocks, we went ahead and broke it into 2 4-ounce pieces for you. Okay. So I'm going to start making the filling for the apples. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. You can make your apple filling. That's a good angle. In the pan that you're going to actually bake it in. But I gave you guys aluminum pie tins so that you can actually throw these out afterwards. You could, you know, it's going to get a little messy. So for your first time, I thought it'd be a little smarter. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in our fancy apple juice. Now you can use apple cider if you want a richer apple flavor. You can, you don't have to use apple juice. You could use a different kind of juice, but basically add the apple juice. And then we're going to add 1 cup of the sugar. So this is not measured. This is for you to measure. Don't dump it all in, because remember, we need some of the sugar for the crust. And we're going to juice a 1/2 lemon. So we're going to cut a lemon and we're going to squeeze it in there. And what the lemon juice does is it keeps the sugar from crystallizing. So you won't have like a real, like, I don't know, like a sugar mixture that has a lot of sharp pieces in it, which I know sounds weird, but sugar can become like glass if it's not cooked properly.
So it's a 1/4 cup of apple juice and then 1 cup of sugar?
It is, it's 1 cup of sugar and a 1/4 cup of apple juice, yes.
What flame on the pan?
You can go pretty much as close to high as you want.
Well,
Okay.
and you
We're
mentioned one more ingredient to keep it from crystallizing?
The lemon juice
Ah, great.
and then the vanilla paste.
Okay, so I did 99.
And we're gonna let this come to a boil. And we want to cook this for a little bit. We want this this mixture to become more like a caramel.
I don't even know what he said, right?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Now, with this process, you have to be aware when we're cooking with sugar and it starts to get to a certain point, it's going to get very hot. It's going to get hotter than boiling water. And if sugar hits your skin, it's going to stick. And that burn is going to hurt worse than most burns you'll ever get. So just be aware. Make sure you're using kitchen towels or oven mitts or anything just to kind of keep your distance and keep you safe. But what's happening here now is your apple juice is reducing as it liquefies the sugar. All that water, that moisture inside the apple juice is going to leave, and these sugar bubbles are going to thicken. And then the sugar starts to go through different stages of cooking. Soft boil, hard boil, soft ball, hard ball, soft crack, hard crack, caramel. So we want to take it closer to the caramel side. Sugar cooking has a lot of different principles based on temperature, but like a sucker, for example, is cooked to hard crack, you know, and that's where when you pour it out and you cool it, it becomes that glass, like hard, like texture. Same thing movie glass used to be made out of was sugar, pulled sugar. So
Short. Hey, chef, what was the 4th ingredient in there? I got my sugar, I got my lemon.
the vanilla paste,
That's what this guy.
the black container.
Yep,
Yep,
all of it.
yep.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the goal here is to cook this down. Then we're gonna add butter in, but I'm not there yet. I wanna see these bubbles get a little thicker. I'd like to see a little more color. Basically, I wanna make a caramel. And when we add the butter, I'm gonna show you the trick because it gets pretty, it can get pretty dangerous adding the butter in. But you guys are pros. So we'll rock through this together.
You're a pro here.
I love this smell.
When you're, it was stuck in the April. I'll have to find it.
Now, if I were to take my sugar right now, and you don't want to mix the sugar too much when it's cooking because that'll cause crystallization too. And I look at it, it's super clear. So right now it's not anywhere where it needs to be, but it's getting closer. If you see how slow that bubble's dripping off, and if this cools, when this cools, it's going to be almost like close to that glass kind of, right now it's pullable, see? And as it cooks for another minute or two, it's going to get really hard. Now what you'll see is you'll start to see a little burning on the edges. If you see that, just lift your pan up and swirl it around a little. I'm actually going to take mine off the heat because I'm at the next stop, or next stage. And I want you guys to see the butter part. Now, I think everyone needs to pay attention for this part. So when you add your butter to a pan of hot caramel, okay, which sounds like a wonderful thing to do, you don't want to add it in while the caramel is boiling or while it's on the heat, because what's going to happen is, and actually I could show you, if I get hurt and don't come back, I'm sorry, but I really enjoyed cooking for all of you. But you can see this caramel color forming here. That's what we're looking for, that brown. But we don't want it to get to the point where it's that dark, almost smells like burnt pennies, if you can imagine what that smells like. So now that it's at that brown caramely color and consistency, that's going to be our texture. That's going to be a lot of our flavor in the dish. If I were to add the butter right now, it's going to start to fry like crazy. See what's starting to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What that's doing is that's popping hot butter and hot sugar at me. And that's not really necessarily something you want to do. So the best is to turn it off the heat, take it off the flame and put it on a different part of your stove. Wait a second and then add your butter. Now what you have here essentially is, if you were to add cornstarch to this, you got a great base for an apple pie. But we're actually going to cook this with the apples so that we get more of that flavor in here, and we thicken this up even more to coat the apples. So I'm going to take this off the heat for a second so I can start to cut my apples.
How much butter do we put in, Chef? Because my piece got sliced, so it's like a big hunk and a little hunk.
You need half of the butter you got, so 4 ounces total.
All right, great. That's really good.
So now when I cut the apple, I could cut it several different ways. I can cut it in thin slices and fan it nicely in the pan, or I can cut it in thicker slices and have a little more dramatic of a presentation. Basically what you can do is you can take your pan to see how many apples you're gonna need and lay them flat side down to see what's gonna fill the pan. This way you're not wasting a bunch of apples. I mean, you can only eat so many apples with peanut butter. So if I were to put this in the pan like this, I would see that I need 3 apples. But if I were to actually take them and slice them thinner so that we get a little bit more of a toothsome feel and take the time to shingle them, you're gonna see I'm gonna go through a lot more apples, but it's gonna be a much prettier presentation. So that little bit of extra time you take to do it this way will have a big payoff when the tart's all done.
Chef, can you move the camera down just a little?
All right. Yes, I am sorry.
Ah, got it.
So there's no wrong way to do this. If you want it thick, you cut them thicker. You want it thin, you cut them thinner. Regardless, it's going to come out great. Again, I like them a little thinner because I like that more kind of dramatic presentation. But if I was doing this at home and I was just making it just for us, I'd probably cut them thicker and give more of that home style look and feel. So this is to gauge how many apples I'm going to have in here. So I'm going to do 2 layers of apples. See, it sounds like someone's having fun.
Sorry,
All right.
ambient noise here.
No, it's all good. It's fun. So I got my apples. So I know how many apples I need now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook these apples with the sugar mixture a little bit. So Turner comes back. Our butter, our caramel butter comes back on. And I'm going to add these apples in and let it all cook together. Now, remember your apples are going to break down, and they're going to break down more in the oven. So we don't want to take it to the point where there's absolutely like just mush for the apples. We do want to allow it to cook enough where they soften and they absorb a lot of this caramel.
Medium heat, Chef?
Medium to medium high, whatever you're comfortable with. At this point, with all the moisture from the apples, you're not really going to burn this caramel. Now what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this to reduce down so it doesn't have this big pool of liquid. If it does, it's going to become just a saucy hot mess when we flip it out of the pan. So we want to take this down and allow this to reduce and completely coat these apples. The apples are going to have a lot of moisture inside, so it's going to stay moist. It's not going to dry out by doing this. But again, if I was building like a great apple pie, you add some cornstarch to the mix right here, and you have your apple pie filling. Now the addition of the lemon juice in here, and then when we do the crust has some lemon juice too, really gives a great flavor. You guys all at this point?
Yep.
Beautiful.
Chef, about how dark should the caramel be right about now?
You know, just your typical kind of like coffee with cream in it.
Okay, got
It's
it.
kind of the way I like to say. And then you pull it off the heat and add your butter. Or are you talking at the point with the apples in it?
Yeah, there's vanilla here.
And I got the apples in it now. Do I leave it on medium heat?
Yeah, medium to medium high, and you can just let it start to boil down. And you just want to stir it occasionally.
Okay. Got it.
And the whole point of stirring is just to keep sugar from burning on the edges, because that's going to be more of a pain during cleanup.
Smells good.
Oh, it's a great smell. So now at this point, this sugar is extremely hot. I mean, it's over 220 degrees. So be aware, you know, when you're stirring, to be patient, be calm, take your time. Don't be distracted by my beautiful hands moving on the screen. Now, as it starts to reduce down, if you can see in my pan, you can see the bubbles are becoming bigger. And then what that means is that more moisture is left here, and it's the thicker sugars and the pectin from the apples boiling. That's what we want. So the more that this boils down, the more it's going to become that syrup, and eventually it'll become that apple jam kind of filling with these apples and everything. And those bubbles are going to continue to get larger and larger.
Well, you know, my next question is like, that has to do with COVID. People already laid off.
Okay. So if you want to take a look at my pan here, you can see that as I pull through, it takes a while for the sauce to come back. That means it's thickening up to that syrup. If I were to actually chill this right now, I'd have a really thick caramel sauce, an apple flavored caramel sauce, which would be delicious. We're going to crunch this down just a little bit more, just to remove some more of this moisture. But we want, when we put it in the bottom of our pie tin, that this mixture has a little bit of soupiness to it to coat the bottom of the pan, because that pastry crust that we're going to put on top is also going to absorb some of this moisture. But if you leave too much in and then you cover it with that crust, it's not going to steam out. So you got to kind of find that perfect balance of what you're looking for to make sure that it works properly. Okay, now we're here. All right, so let me get you a little closer to my pan. If you can see, actually, I'll bring my pan to you. When I stir my apples now, if you take a look, you can see it's all coating together and coming. See that? See how it all kind of pulls together as one big group? That's what I'm looking for. I want to see that thickness there. I want to know that it's all going to stay together when I cook it. That's the kind of beauty. I'm going to take this actually probably just another minute on high. Actually, I'm going to go to the big stove just because you guys have more powerful burners at home than I do. I want to get this rocking so we can get it in the oven. Okay. Now, for my next trick, okay. So this is what the final product should look like. See how tight it is, but it's still a little soupy? That's what we're going for. Now, when we place this into the pan, this is our one chance to have a good presentation of these apples. So, like I said before, I like to take the time at this point and really do it well. But remember, these apples are piping hot. Your guys' apples are going to be a little cooler by the time you get to this, which is good. So it'll be a little more safe for this time around. Me, I'm not very smart, so I like to do this when this is ripping hot. But the nicer you arrange the apples now, the nicer final product you're going to have in the end. Now, say you make this filling ahead of time and you put it aside and it gets too hard on you, like too firm, you can heat it right back up. It doesn't take a lot to heat it up. And then it'll kind of just come back to life, which is really nice. We're getting all that caramel at the bottom of the pan too, and that's what we want. So I am going to go ahead and pour this in. But if your gut tells you that you have too much liquid in here, you're probably right. So keep that in mind. But if you see how much is in there, there's quite a bit. Okay. I'm going to go grab my piece of pie dough.
Ready for a pandemic over here.
Okay. So this is the dough that you'll be using. I went ahead, we're going to make this next, but I went ahead and made a batch and rolled it into a disc. Now, when I put my dough onto the pie or the tart, I'm going to press it down and then lightly fold over the edges. I don't want to tuck it all the way under the edges because I do need to flip this. So I'm just pressing it down enough. And you want to make sure that it's nice and sealed, and beautiful. And then I'm going to put it on a sheet pan and it goes right in the oven just like this. Typically with a pie, you'd normally do some sort of an egg wash or brush it with butter or something like that. With this, you're not going to because this is the bottom. So I know it's kind of backwards, but there's a reason. I like to knock off a little bit of the excess dough, not too much because you want to leave some crust to it. And then this is going to go into the oven for about 15-20 minutes. So might go a little quicker in mine because mine's convection. That's about how long I'm taking yours.
What temperature?
For you guys, it's 425.
What if you have a convection oven, 400?
I would do 400, yeah.
Somebody with an earshot.
All right. How are we doing so far?
Good.
This is what mine looks like here.
Let's see.
Oh, this start gave up any home
It's looking good. It's just got to thicken up a little more.
Okay. It's getting so bright.
I love Tarte Tatin. The cool thing about these is you can serve them with mascarpone, you can serve them with ice cream, you can eat them by themselves. You know, it's one of those dishes, you can eat it for breakfast if you want. It makes a great breakfast pastry. There's just a lot.
going here.
All right. So, we're going to start on our pie dough in a minute.
I only have 6. Well, no, but they're not like in a row. Yeah, I just had like 6 extra.
Chef, is it normal for this to get pretty smoky here?
I would take it off the heat.
Right.
If it's smoking like that, you're probably done.
Right.
Because that means that a lot of your moisture is out and it should be pretty mellow now.
Yeah, it was pretty fast when going from light brown to dark brown.
Yeah, sugar moves real quick on you. It's like me on the racetrack. All right. So should we get started on the dough?
Sure.
So this is Chef Natalie's food processor, so it's not mine. So I got to figure this one out. Okay, so for our dough, we have the remaining part of our butter, which is the equivalent of 1 stick. We're going to use 1 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of sugar, a pinch of salt, lemon zest, 1 egg yolk, and then a little bit of ice water. Okay? So for the first part, we're going to add our dry ingredients. So I'm going to add 1 cup of flour. Now you're going to have extra flour because we gave it to you so that you could roll your dough later.
Okay.
1/4 cup of sugar. Teaspoon of salt. Now, to add the lemon zest, if you have a lemon zester, that's awesome. Does everyone have a lemon zester?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
So you're going to zest the lemon in there. When you're zesting lemon, you want to make sure you're only getting the yellow part. Everything white underneath the yellow skin is just bitter, like me. So it won't be super good. And it's going to add a weird flavor to your dough. Okay. The next part, we're going to take the butter and break it into small little pea-sized pieces. Pea like the vegetable. And now, basically, this is the same principle for making biscuits, making pie dough. You know, this whole, cold butter in little pieces worked into flour. What this is going to do is allow the flour to coat the butter and break it into butter-filled little balls, which is what we want. So we're going to put the lid on. And using the pulse function, I'm just going to buzz it a few times. If I turn it on high and let it spin like crazy, the butter is going to get too hot and melt, and we won't have a nice texture to our crust. So now at this point, if I were to take this flour mix out, and you can see it, it's got little balls of butter in there. That's the base to our pie dough, or tart dough, I should say. I keep calling it pie dough. The next thing we're going to add is an egg yolk. Just the yolk.
How much salt did we put in? Just a pinch?
Just a pinch. You know, the salt's between the salt and the lemon zest, it's going to activate all the flavors of the toasted flour. But you don't want too much because you don't want it to be a salty dough. I'm going to grab a touch of ice water. So when making this, the waters are a big variable. Now, like when I make pasta dough, for example, even pizza dough, the amount of water that I put in the dough is all based on the humidity outside because it makes a big difference. In the winter, I use a different amount of water than I do in the summer, depending on the building I am. My recipes here are completely different than they were at my last place because the environment's different. You got to take that into effect. So when we use the water, we want to use ice cold water because it's going to help keep that butter together. But you're not going to dump it in. We're going to just drizzle it in and see how the dough comes together. You can always add more, but you can't add less. So the first thing I'm going to do is start to pulse this. Now I'm going to add a few drops of the water. Maybe call it a tablespoon to start. Now, if I look, you'll see it's already coming together thicker than it was before. But we need a few more drops of water to help finish bringing that together to make our dough work together. Now if I look and I take my dough and I squeeze it, it comes together. It looks like a broken up mess, like this, but the minute I squeeze it, I have a dough. So that's what we're looking for. I'm gonna dump this out on the board so you'll be able to see it a little better. Okay. Let me get down here. What an angle. Okay. So here I have my wet dough mix, if you would. Okay. Now, if I take my hands and just squeeze it, it's going to start to come together. There are going to be spots where there's some egg yolk still not fully mixed in or some flour not fully mixed in. So I'm going to just knead it where I fold it in half and then with the heel of my hand, press it down. Then I turn it, fold it in half, heel the hand, press it down. At this point, you scrape in all these little fragments of dough and get it all together. You don't want to over mix this. You don't want to mix it like crazy or do it in a dough mixer with a hook because then you're going to add gluten structures and then you're going to have a really chewy dough and it's not going to be a delicious, beautiful, flaky dough. So the doughs come together. It smells amazing. If you guys can smell it, I mean, it smells like pure lemon, which is awesome. I'm going to take this and roll it into a disc the size of the Tarte Tatin dish. And the reason I'm going to do that now is because it's soft right now and it's easy to work with. And then I'm going to put it in plastic wrap and refrigerate it for about an hour. I want it to set before I put it on top of the tart, which let me check on that real quick. It's going to be great. So to do it, you take some of the remaining flour. You want to dust your board. Now you don't want to add a giant mountain of flour. Again, you can always add more, but if you mess this dough up and you take all the moisture out, well, it's kind of hard to fix. Then you have to add water and then you have to add more flour. And now you have this whole back and forth mixture that just doesn't make sense. But I start by forming it into a disc with my hands. And now I know all I have to do is focus on making this a little bit wider. You want your dough to have a little thickness to it. So I'll take my rolling pin and I'll normally rub it with a touch of flour. And then I go 2 times that way and then a slight angle this way, angle that way. See? You can see it's spreading out fairly evenly in terms of staying as a circle.
Chef, does this look like the right amount of moisture in the dough?
Let's see. Can we spotlight that, please? Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
Looks great.
Cool.
Looks like it's coming together.
Right.
So this is the dough. You have to be gentle with it because it will break right now. If you look, see, thumb can go right through. If that happens, you just press it back together. But you're going to take this disc, put a sheet of plastic on top, put it right in the refrigerator, and that's going to set it so it's going to be nice and firm. That's the kind of beauty we want with this. And now it's ready to roll where this can just go right on top once it sets in the fridge of your apples, and boom, you're ready to roll. The other thing you can do with this, if you wanted to, is you could fill this with something, fold it over, and bake it like this, and all of a sudden you have like a hand pie. or a crostata or anything like that. This dough is very versatile in that sense. The egg yolk in there helps it hold together so that you can add a little bit more wetter mixtures to it. But it's a great dough, works really well, easy to put back together, easy to work with.
How long do you keep it in the fridge?
About an hour. Don't tell me you have a blast chiller over there too.
No.
All right, so I'm gonna take this away. And I am gonna focus on you guys for a minute.
So as is, on the board, in the fridge.
Yeah, cover a sheet of plastic on top though, because you don't want it to get a weird crust either. Little tip, if you guys have a bench scraper or even a metal spatula,
Yeah.
it works really great for scraping all these little bits of flour and stuff off your table or your counter. Makes cleanup 100 times easier. Because then you just come through with soap and water and it's done. All those little chunks of dough aren't mixing with your soapy sponge and giving you just a bad time. Let me check on that. Hey. Need about one more minute. I think I'm gonna be ready. Okay. How you guys coming along?
Good.
So your apple mix is made, your doughs are made, right?
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's awesome. So great. I'm gonna take the apple tart out in 1 second. I'm gonna show you how to flip it. And that's kind of the big, that's the hardest part of this whole thing. And just like with anything, I may mess it up too. But if I do, it's probably John's fault. John, I can start doing that to you now. You've been in enough classes.
That's
I
right.
can harass you. All right. Amazing. So, main question is, what am I looking for with my tart? Let me turn this down. All right. I want to see a nice golden brown color. I don't mind this little bit of like over brown on the edges because that's still going to add another nutty flavor. That's not anywhere near burnt. I want to know that it's going to free up when I touch it like this. Because I have to flip it, I want to make sure that I'm not going to have any issues coming forward. So the next step, and what I think you guys got to really pay attention to here, because it may save your life one day, is how to flip this thing. So I only have one, so we're going to have one shot to do this. So I think you guys should watch. No pressure. Okay, so you want to get your serving platter, right? And what we're going to do, and I like to use towels or oven mitts. Your oven mitts, your serving platter goes on top of your pie tin, right? You're going to pull it to the counter, and using your oven mitt hand, you're going to catch this dish, okay? And now, 1, 2, flip really fast. Now the hard part's done. So all we have to do is worry about peeling this up. This will cool fairly quickly. It's aluminum, so it transfers heat really well. But you can use a spatula or anything to pull it off. And when we do, you're going to see a beautiful apple tart. Now, you don't eat this just like this. You want it to cool a little because you want all this caramel on here to set. And then once it does, you can see the design on here. And now it's kind of your last minute chance to fix any mishaps that might have happened. Like I got a few apples that are stuck here in the pan. So I'll take them and get them on here so that they set. And once this cools, we're gonna have just this beautiful looking apple tart. Now, if you like Dutch babies and German apple pancakes and all that, it's basically the same principle with the arranging the apples and making this caramel mix and all that. It's just they pour pretty much almost like a souffle batter or a pancake batter on top. And that's it. That's the Tarte Tatin. So once this cools, you slice it and you enjoy. But you can't slice it until it's, I mean, you can slice it now, but it's going to be a mess. But you can also see the crust puffed up really nice in there. That's from the egg yolk. The egg yolk souffles as it cooks, so it adds a little bit of height to the dish. And again, if I were to use bigger apples, you'd have bigger chunks. I like the smaller ones. It's just easier to eat, but completely up to you. But this pan is hot. If you touch the bottom of it, it is really hot. Any questions? You guys comfortable? You ready to knock this out?
Yep.
Beautiful. You got the apples, you got the dough, right?
Yes, sirree.
All right. Well, thank you guys. If there's any other questions, you guys let me know. Be happy to answer them. But otherwise, all you got to do is put dough on and bake it.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Take care, everyone.
Take
Yeah,
care.
happy Easter. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.